Hello, my quilty friends. It's Stacy of Stacy Creates Stuff, and today I am going to show you how to create the Wild Churn Dash Quilt. Now, if you're looking for a project that doesn't involve a lot of precise cutting and a lot more sewing, this might be the project for you. I will warn you, however, that if you are into precision in both your cutting and your seams and all that good stuff, this project may not be for you. But you know, sometimes I just feel like getting past the cutting part and getting right to the sewing. This is that kind of project. So let's get started. And I am cutting 8-inch squares. You can actually start with whatever size you want. It does not represent the finished size of your block, but the larger you start out, the larger your finished block will be. So the intention with these fabrics is to make a block like this. I call it a crazy cut. So when you are in a quilting mode where you, one, do not care whether things match up, and B, you don't feel like cutting a million little pieces to do all your thing, then you can start and do this method. I really like it. It's really fun. I have this piece of red fabric that was just in my pieces, small pieces bin, and I am going to go ahead and slice off a bigger chunk of the background. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off this bit. These 8-inch squares do not have to be exact by any means. Matter of fact, I don't even think mine are a full 8-inch. So that is that. I think ultimately I just want 2 of each background fabric and then 2 of each red fabric. I have a bunch of different reds. Sometimes I just want a project that doesn't have a lot of precision in it. These are the 4 fabrics that I am going to use. I already have my squares cut from this one because I had a smaller piece of that. So nice to know I have a lot more left in case I want to use that on the backing or something. But it's just all these really lovely deep orangey reds. And again, I'm not squaring up. No precision at this point. We can be a little more precise later on. All right, there's my 2 squares. I use that term very loosely. They're obviously wider in one direction than the other, and that's fine. There we go. So how many squares do we have in total? The answer to that is 16. Now, the key to this is that you have to layer, well, you're going to stack these in an order so that when you move certain pieces in the pile, you are ready to go and ready to sew the block together. I'm going to start with, and all the fabrics are going to be face up. So here is a background, and here is a red. I need to press that. I'll press them all in a moment. We'll take a different background now. And a different red. And I'm just kind of making sure that the top and the side here are fairly even, and I don't really care about what's happening on these edges. Let's do another background. You see this one's cut more square. And a red. And a background. I think you're getting the idea now. And a red. So And then I can make another stack, and I would put them in probably a different order so that all my blocks are different. If I did the same order, then I would just have a set that had the same matches together in the end. And I think I would want mine to be a little bit different. So this is 8 fabrics. Yes, 8 fabrics stacked. That's probably enough to force my rotary cutter to stitch through or to cut through. So then I'm just going to do a different order. And again, I'm trying to more or less align the top and the right side. Stick that on there. Okay, before I do any cutting though, I am going to take and press these so that they are nice and flat. All right, I am back with my stacks pressed. Move that one out of the way. And the premise is that you start with I usually use a traditional block. So if you have a favorite block, then this is the perfect way to do this. I did this with my random rail fence, where I took squares and then I just made 2 cuts and then sewed them all together, and it was totally random and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing that. And for this, I wanted a little bit more complex block, and so that is why I am using a churn dash. But let's take a look at the anatomy of this block. It is based on a 9 patch. So there are 2 vertical lines, 2 horizontal lines. Then just looking at the top, which happens to be the same as the bottom, then there is a half square triangle, and there is a split piece here. Same thing is for the bottom row. On the side row, the center stays how it is, and then the 2 side pieces get split further. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I have to keep in mind that, and you know what? I think I'm just going to take this one and put it on top because it is closer to being the 8-inch side. I don't want to lose track of the fact that I have 8-ish inches to work with. Now, just so that you can see, if I start with an 8-inch block, normally you might end up with something that is just a little bit smaller than that, but you can see this is about 6 inches trimmed. So it's going to end up being about a 5.5 inch block. And you'd think the points are cut off now, they just get way cut off later on. So we'll see. And in light of that, I think I am going to move my vertical and horizontal cuts to be a little more towards the center. More churn dashy, less hole in the barn doory, if that makes sense. I always think of churn dash as being more equalish in the thirds, and hole in the barn door is really 1/4, 2/4, and 1/4. That's how I think about it in my head. All right, so as I mentioned, there are 2 vertical cuts. Now here's the great thing. They do not even have to be a parallel. I was about to say straight. They should be straight. They just don't have to be parallel to the edge. And I have not trimmed this edge. I mean, some go a little over, some, it doesn't matter. So I am just going to make a cut. Probably should be bringing out the big rotary cutter. And I'm going to make a cut over here. And I'm going at, a slight angle because wonky is wonderful. Now I'm going to turn this whole thing this way. And I'm going to make 2 more cuts. I decided to get the big cutter. Make it a little easier on my hand. All right, I'll make this one going this way. Oh, that got so much better. And I'll have this one angling a little bit this way. Okay, now we have our 9 pieces. But keeping them all together, we need to think about how this block is. Now, this block, no matter which way you turn it, it has the same kind of configuration. So I don't really have to turn this back to work it out. The corners become half square triangles, and then these edge pieces get split in half-ish, because again, none of the cuts have to be super accurate. So I'm just going to pull this corner out a little bit and give it a cut. I'm not going to cut directly from corner to corner. You certainly could, but I think I'm going to go a little bit inward. You know, we're just going to see what happens. Okay, I'm going to put that back. It's really important that if you take a section out, that once you're done cutting it, you put it back. So I'm going to cut this one this way. Now this one, I'm still in camera. I'm going to go ahead and cut that one corner to corner. Right? Why not? Put that back. Bring this one out over here. Cut that like that, and it goes back. All right, so you can see, you could stop at this point actually and do the next part of swapping fabrics around. This is a block. I think this is a shoe fly block, so that works perfectly fine. Again, you can use a lot of traditional blocks. The more cuts there are, the more your block is going to shrink from its original size down, and you're going to lose little pieces. So I try to make sure that there's a lot of symmetry in the block that I choose, either just symmetry both vertically and horizontally, or at least symmetry in one direction. And well, you'll see. All right, so we have that. We have this 9 patch, so that's symmetrical, 2 lines, 2 lines. Then we have all the corners are cut, and now we're going to slice these. And I want to make sure, paying really close attention, I don't want to accidentally cut this the wrong direction. It has to go this way. So I'm going to pull it out, give it a cut, stick it right back. So, and I can make sure that all my pieces are still fitting together. Pull this one out. This line's going to go this way. Stick it right back. Let's do this one. Oh, how great to cut all these pieces and not have to worry about precision. Okay, we're doing really well. We just have one cut, and I'm going to pull this out. Do it over here. Give that a whack. Put that back into place. Okay, all my cuts have been made. Yay! So now I'm going to take the top fabric and I'm going to put it on the very bottom of that stack, but just on the pieces that make up the little churn dash. So again, just the top fabric. You'll know you're doing it right when the fabric that's next is the one that's going to be the same throughout. Now this particular block just has the 2 fabrics in the block. That is the traditional thing. But I'm going to show you another little step here in just a moment. If you had a block that had to use 3 fabrics, the 2 fabric type blocks are nice to start out with because you know that it's just going to pair with the one that is below it. And in the end, the very last set of pieces there are going to be those 2. So that is why I staggered a background of red, a background of red, a background of red the whole time. Now, if you had a fabric or had a block that you needed a 3rd color, you'd have to be mindful of that when you're stacking, that each 3 colors in a series or 3 fabrics in a series need to go together, that you would be okay with that. And in this case, I would take 2 and put that at the bottom, and then, you know, I could have a different center. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I don't want to do that. So bringing it back. Now, for me, I take just one little section, and then I sew each of those pieces. I just whoosh, 1/4 inch, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Press them all, stack them back up into the same order. That is important. You should be okay though. If you get off when you go to sew when you sew the row together, you'll know that you might need to rearrange something. So that is step 1. Sew each of the little sections together. Center is the center, so we don't need to worry about that. These. I don't take over this, and I don't take over 2 corners at the same time because it gets way too confusing for me to figure out where I am. So I just take 1 stack at a time, sew that all up, put it back. So unlike traditional piecing, it is sometimes difficult to figure out how to line things up because normally these 2 edges would be exactly the same and they're not. So what do? Well, in part, you just kind of wing it. This is the upper left corner of the block. And so I am trying to make this, my seam allowance will be coming down here. So I'm trying to line this up so that there will be fabric down at this end, as opposed to aligning it up here, and I'll have to whack off a whole bunch there. So because this is the upper left and there's a block or section of block below this, this is where I want the best seam to be, if that makes sense. I can whack off whatever's at the top. Also, you don't really need to worry about perfect 1/4 inch seam allowances. I would aim for a 1/4 inch or even a scant 1/4 inch, but I wouldn't be too worried if they're a little smaller or even just a smidge bigger. Nothing's going to line up in this block. I have chain pieced all of the corners from that stack, and this was the last one that I pieced, so I'm going to cut them apart and stack them there. That was the last one I sewed. I'm going to cut them apart but stack them so that they are in the correct order. There I go, and I'm just going to put this stack right back in that space with the other pieces of the block. Now it's on to the next set of pieces, and because they are at an angle, if I line them up exactly, they'll be off. So I am going to just move that top piece down just a little bit, so when I'm sewing the 1/4 inch, it kind of hits where they intersect, more or less, but more so than it would if I lined up those edges exactly. Here are all my sewn pieces stacked up in the correct position as far as which of the 9 spaces they should go into. I'm going to take them over to the iron and press just 1 stack at a time and put it back, then the next stack, and so forth. And I will lay them all out again, and then I will come back and I will give you some tips on how to sew the pieces together. It's not as straightforward as you think, but it's definitely doable. Here is a little tip when pressing. I'm pressing all of my seam allowances toward the red, since that is obviously the darker of the fabric, and you'll notice that I've stacked them all going the same orientation. But before you panic, or I panic, let me show you how easy it is to write them the right way. This block here, which is currently on the bottom, is my topmost part of my block. So I'm starting with the one that's on top of my pressed stack, which goes on the bottom. And if you look over here on my little layout of blocks, this is the top center, which happens to match the inside of the bottom block. So I know if I put those two next to each other, same happened when I did these side pieces here. That piece I made to match that. And then I'm just going to stack, and I know that every other one is red and the other is cream. So if I have a red here, then cream goes there. Just turn that around, red, cream, red, cream, red, and my last one is cream, and that is correct because that needs to be the opposite of what the center is. All right, I just have these two to do, and then we're back to the sewing machine. I'm going to start assembling the blocks in a similar manner than that I did in assembling the pieces of the blocks, which is that I'm going to take the upper left corner and the upper left center of each stack and keep sewing them together and then stack those. Now the question arises, these are not the same size. You know, one's shorter than the other. Got stuff hanging off over here. How does one line these up? Well, keeping in mind that after this row is sewn, it's going to be attached to a row down here, I want to make this line be as straight as possible. So when lining these up, I am going to keep those in mind. Because they're at a slight angle, flip this around here, you can see I have a little bit of an overhang, because when I sew my 1/4 of an inch, where the 1/4 of an inch comes, that's where the two pieces are meeting. And if I'm a little off, it's going to be okay. This is not a precise block by any means, but that is what I'm aiming for. So let's put these sets together. Now that my rows are all pressed, it's going to be way easier to sew the pieces together. Now these seams will not nest. If you've done a churn dash before, and you know, traditionally where all the blocks are perfectly square and all that good stuff, then you would be able to nest these seams. Sometimes they might nest and sometimes they might not, and that's okay. And again, just like matching up any other pieces, you just want to align the best that you can. I kind of try to center them. This one, the seams don't quite nest, but they come pretty close. So I'm just going to sew these two sets together, and then I will sew on the bottom row. I have pressed all of that stack, and I have my previous stack as well, all pressed. And now comes the fun part of trimming the blocks. I've already trimmed a few of them and determined that a 6-inch square trimmed is what I'm going to get. That's the most I can get out of the blocks. Hopefully all of them will be able to get a 6-inch square. So you do not worry. There definitely are going to be points that are cut off at this stage of the game, let alone later when they get sewn together and even more of it disappears. Don't worry about it. Let's get trimming. 6 inches from these blocks should also work. Also, you do not have to worry about, a lot of times I will use a line on the ruler to align with the seam, but not in this case. Remember, these lines are not parallel to the edge of the block, so I can kind of move my ruler wherever I want as long as I know I'm going to get 6 inches, which means that even though the blocks are different but very similar, they could be even more different just on the way you angle it to cut. Not all of your blocks will give you enough of a leadway to kind of wiggle around, but so far I think I'm going to be pretty good at getting a 6-inch square out of this. If I had a 6-inch square ruler, it would be even better. I don't. I'm a little bit shy up in that corner, but that's okay because I'm likely to be cutting that part off anyway. Now at this point, since I've already trimmed 2 sides, I do need to make sure that I am keeping using the line on the ruler to align either the top or the bottom edge. I can't go wacky, or, well, you'll have a lot of problem fitting them all together. I'm just going to keep going until the entire stack is done. I may have encountered a block that is a little bit shy of 6 inches across. I can get pretty close. It's missing about 1/8 of an inch over here, and not a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch over there. Let me just kind of keep finagling it. I think that's as close as I'm going to get. I think I can still make it work though. And depending on how I decide to lay these blocks out, I might not even use this block. I'm going to put a little clip on that one just so I know that's the one that's a little bit shy. Okay, now the fun part, laying them out. Okay, that was just a quick layout. Obviously I went red background, cream background, keeping them opposite of each other. And now I can go and refine them further. The other thing though that I can do is to kind of play around with the placements and turn of the blocks. In this particular case, I think it's good. I'm going to stand back and squint a little bit, maybe take a picture and study it to see if there's anything else that needs to be changed. Otherwise, I'm just going to put it together row by row. And here we go with the finished top. I hope you'll give this technique a try. Again, you can use it for a lot of different traditional blocks. Just remember that the more cuts you have to make to your original stack of squares, the smaller the finished block will be. But it's really fun, and I love playing with this idea. I think I might have to try another one in a few weeks, but it's fun to spice things up. All right, if you are looking for other tutorials, check out this one.